So one of the things that I tell people who are business owners is find out what the new obligations are. Talk to your compliance people, talk to your insurance people, talk to your accountants, talk to the attorneys, talk to your marketing people. There's also, you need to make sure you have disclaimers out there. Make sure your disclaimers are concurrent with all the new rules and regulations out there.
We've had great guests on this program, and tonight is no different. It's my buddy, Richard Solomon. Richard Solomon is not new here to the program, and for good reason. He's an attorney. He's a consultant. He has such a wide range of areas of expertise that we, from time to time, say, Richard, we're just going to call and have you on because your areas, I mean, many times, Richard, the backstory of why I call you is because I run in, or not just, again, you're an attorney, thank God, we're good. But we hear it in the news. We read stories about things that may seem off the wall. But I'm like, hey, an attorney would give good perspective, and from your knowledge of the business world and your involvement with my father's place and your scope is so wide that I'm like, hey, let's have a good conversation with Richard Solomon. So, Richard, thank you so much for joining me once again here on Mind Your Business.
Thank you for the honor. It is truly an honor, especially a big kudos on the Nielsen ratings. But
thank you.
That is a big deal. I know that you talked about that at the top of the show, but it is a big deal. This is New York. It's a big market. And to rise to the top of a very big market is quite an accomplishment.
So I appreciate that, and especially from you. You're on the, he's on the other side.
On FM.
He's on FM. So but Richard understands that, and that's why I pointed out because people may not realize, and being in the top 10, we recently came in number 3. Now coming in number 3, remember on a Sunday night we're up against, depending on the time of year, we could be up against baseball, football. Hockey, basketball, again, depending on the season
and homework.
We're not supposed to talk about that.
But there's always homework due on Monday. That was pushed off until the last minute.
So, Richard, there's a lot to talk about, and let's not hide the fact Purim's coming up in a couple of days. So, I'm sorry.
No, Purim is kind of interesting because that's when you turn things around a little bit. What's that word?
Vinahapachu. Basically, turn around, turn over, basically upside down.
All right, so let's say, for example, that today you're the guest. What do you think about that? Why not? Why not?
Hey,
why not?
What are you doing to me?
When was the last time you were the guest on your own show?
FM's gonna beat AM here.
Well, we're both talk shows.
Okay. All right, Richard. All right.
So why don't we flip the?
All right. Hey, sounds like a wild idea. You know what? Hey, anything goes. Purim's this week. It's fine. It's all good.
Do I need a funny outfit? Even though it's radio.
Oh, Richard, this is great. This is going to be fun.
All right. So let's. So by the way,
you're turning the tables. All right.
So you're listening to Mind Your Business on WABC 770 AM, also on the app. Okay.
Good intro. We're not redoing the intro.
There you go. All right. So one of the things that you guys do now, first of all, going back to a radio show you did earlier this year, actually, it was the 2 that you did. You had this show about like the 17 fundamental.
Thank you.
That was just a blockbuster.
Thank you.
And it was a monologue. And so you really were very concentrated in your content, and you really it was very smooth and very, it made so much pragmatic sense. All right, but let's bring that forward one more step. All right,
sure.
So for all of the little people out there in terms of business,
no one's little. Hey, I'm gonna defend my listeners here. Hey, Richard, what are you doing here? I want my ratings to stay good.
Right, but you're a small business, a small, really small
mom
business.
and pop,
and, one person business. Those smaller businesses, right? How could they harness the engine of your marketing efforts? Because when maybe the people out there who hear all the guests, who are all these great accomplished people, like the
Beth Comstock,
yes, from GE,
right? Sure.
GE's got if they want to write a check for marketing, they can do it. They just call petty cash. And they write themselves like a big check. I'm sure, it's like no problem. I'm sure people at the lowest levels have good check writing authority. So, but what do you do with efficacy for lower budgets? limited budgets that still get the power out there to get the word out. So if I came to you and I said, look, maybe I wrote a book, or maybe I've got a product, and it's not like a new vodka where I'm trying to compete with thousands of thousands of existing.
Hey, firm's coming. Let's talk about the new vodka.
Right. Well, no, we would just use old vodka. Because it's hard to bring certain things to crowded markets. But let's say I have something that's niche-y enough. Maybe it's a little app or something like that. I come to you and I say, I need something to get off the ground. It's hazy out there. There's a lot of marketing noise. There's so many shows, and people, the bandwidth out there is very small but very wide. Yeah. So so let's say I have like 100,000 hits on YouTube. Well, is that really a lot? I don't know, because the truth is they're loading up, millions of hours. Yeah. So what is the budget conscious business owner do to harness your efforts?
All right, we're going to go to a commercial break. No, I'm just kidding. I told you it was going to be fun. Okay, it's an excellent question, and so let's start first with the foundation. Okay, foundation is that marketing is a necessity, not a luxury. That I want to just set out at the outset. Whatever you're going to ultimately do, whether you need to harness a firm like BLMG, Bottom Line Marketing Group, a strong marketing presence, a strong marketing firm, or you just need to do something that, in theory, a graphic designer could bang out, understand that you need to build your narrative out there in the marketplace. In fact, I'm going to quote one of the great lines that came up with Beth Comstock from the shows that we had with her, and she has this in her book. Strategy is a story well told. It's a great line. Okay. Strategy is a story well told. What does that mean? That means that you have to have a story, a narrative, okay, and then you have to say it over and over again. And it doesn't make a difference what industry you're in. Whatever industry you're in, you have to have a story. You have to have a narrative, and you have to say it out there in a creative way with presence. You have to have a penetration factor. You have to get it out there a variety of different ways and say it again and again and again. So that I want to put out there as the framework for the answer. Now, I'm not going to dodge. You asked a good question. What happens if you're on an extremely tight budget? And then the answer is we have to then draw out the box and see how, what is your goal? And then the goal has very probably will shrink based on the available budget. The way I always address that question, and it comes up all the time, is that, okay, if you have an airplane and you want to fly the plane to Los Angeles, there's a certain amount of fuel that you need for that plane. Let's say you only have half the fuel. You can't afford to fill up the tank. Good, so then the plane will take you to Chicago or St. Louis, whatever. It will take you half the distance. You just can't expect to get the same outcome on a budget that's smaller. However, if your budget is smaller, and it's very important, a business should approach it in a very level way. If they don't have the budget for something, then they should not be jumping in, but should just assign whatever that budget is, and then we work backwards and say, okay, let's see what can be accomplished within that budget, and then, but be realistic. Your goal, your vision may need to come down a few notches to accommodate the budget allowance.
Right, but do you have a thing where the plane is landed and you make enough money to refuel and go the further distance?
Yeah, well, that could happen. Again, circumstances change in any given situation. There are companies that start off with a smaller budget, and then things started to work out, and then they were able to scale. Okay, or vice versa, a company that had to downsize. And it's important, of course, that they keep track of the metrics along the way in order to not to suddenly come with a big surprise like, the plane's going down. God forbid. You have to know the metrics. Got to keep your eye on the dashboard in order to know exactly where you're holding. Of course.
Now let's go back to narratives. Mm-hmm. Some narratives are much more exciting than others.
Yeah.
Let's say I just wrote a great math book. How do you turn that around so that the narrative
You pick my favorite example.
is an
Richard, you picked a favorite example. A math book?
Right. How do we, grammar.
Oh, man. Okay. Now, listen. At the end of the day, a good marketing firm can always jazz up and make something exciting out of really anything. I mean, a couple of months back, we had on Linda Kaplan-Thaler, who talked about the Aflac campaign, which was for some type of insurance, right? So it meant Aflac. Now, of course, there was a certain reason why she took that, narrative, but your question is a very fair question, but there are a lot of parameters at play. So really, the simple answer is you need to find out that whoever's the owner of the company, what excites them, what are they looking to get through this campaign. Then, of course, you need to keep an eye on, okay, how will I get a return on investment? What are some of the aspirational goals that are behind this? You need to really dig out, which is what we do before we get involved in any campaign, is we dig down to get a good understanding. What's behind it? Is it just to make money? That's not really a good reason. That's a result. Remember, a very important line that's been said here many, many times. Every business at its core exists to solve a problem in the marketplace. That's rule number one. If they're not solving a problem in the marketplace, they're not going anywhere. In general, they're not going anywhere. Every single business solves a problem in the marketplace. So therefore, once you're solving that problem, okay, how are we going to present it to the audience so that they say, oh, you know what? Your company has the solution. I want to use your company. So,
I attend as a member of the media.
Right.
I attend all kinds of trade shows, and I'm amazed that I find booths where I don't even know what they're doing. They'll say, the
that's
leader,
no good.
Right. It'll be like the leader in emerging strategies, and I'm like, well, what is that? Where they'll they have a name that doesn't really work to help you understand what they do. It could be like something called, like, I don't know, just, Clover Star, right? Or like, well, what is that? Or just, Gurk Bean. What's that?
You're a creative guy. You come up with these names on the spot. Like, whoa.
Gurk Bean Industries. I'm like, what do they do? It's like, the leader,
right.
Or at the forefront. I'm like, at the forefront of what? And then, they have a very nondescript booth. It maybe has a picture of like a star and some glitter.
Oh, no. I want to jump in.
And you're sort of like, well, a lot of times I'll say, what do you do? And then they can't give me the elevator answer.
Oh, no.
And then another time it's like, they say, we do this. I'm like, that's a solution in search of a problem that doesn't really exist in my industry.
Let's go in order. So let's go in order.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Number one is that when a company is out there, rule number one is you should always, does it pass this rule? Tell me what you want to tell me. Tell me what you want to tell me. Am I being clear? Do I have to scratch my head and figure out like what's going on here? It has to be very, very clear. Now, sometimes people turn around and they say, well, look, Nike is, their swoosh and their slogan is just do it, or Coke is it's the real thing. Let me first put that, let me put that to rest. When a company has $100 million budget or $500 million or more than whatever the actual numbers are, then you can get away with anything. Like, for example, Geico. Geico can have the little gecko there and just say work, home, whatever their campaign is, because they've invested so much behind it so that you could say just the leader in. They could take the high road because it's bombarded, it's supported, buffeted by all the different types of marketing around it. So everyone knows what it stands for. Nike, people understand it's not a fish tank company. It's athletic footwear. That's what they do. That's Nike. So they could go with just do it because there's enough money behind it. And people understand exactly what the product stands for. However, if you're going to a trade show and the company has a modest budget, let's say a modest budget for a small company would be $10,000 to $15,000 a year on marketing. Let's say that's just a modest budget. Whatever they put out, they have to be torpedo focused, laser focused on exactly making sure that it's clear what they do. Shouldn't be just, New Horizons. Like, New Horizons of what? What do you do? So, for example, if it's legal work, it's accounting work, whatever it is, and whatever specific subset of specialty that company does, it has to be very clearly communicated. So that's number one. Your second question,
solution in search of a problem. because sometimes I'll go to Legal Tech, which is the legal industry trade show, and I've covered that as a media, and I've gone as a lawyer, and it's evolved over the years. And sometimes I look at what people have designed for the legal profession, and I'll say, that's not a problem that we actually have. So it's sort of like they've solved a problem that doesn't really exist.
So
it doesn't exist in any real...
I'll jump in and to say as follows. First of all, rule number one is I always would need to know all the parameters in order to figure out. But I'm not just dodging your question. I'll give a standard answer, but I will just preface it by making the following disclaimer, and that is I would always need to dig down to figure out what the actual root of that confusion is in order to answer it properly. But the standard answer is that in general, that a company should not go that way. Companies should not go that way. That they're in search of a problem. That is a I don't want to say a recipe for failure, but there's certainly a red flag, a yellow flag, a red flag for potential failure in that case. Not always. Again, there are people that, you know, if God wants someone to win the lottery, they're going to win the lottery. You know, and the guy could like accidentally fill out the wrong numbers. That, you know, his wife told him, put down these 6 numbers, and the person read it backwards and then won the lottery. It can happen. You know, God can make anything happen. But in general, every business is successful and exists and is successful if they solve a problem in the marketplace.
Now, when clients come to your group, do you actually do an autopsy of prior marketing efforts to see if it's the marketing or if it's the business?
Yeah. So in general, again, depending on the budget that they have allowed, we do a discovery phase, and that's very, very vital and healthy process really to any type of campaign, and that is to dig down. Why do you exist? What is the buyer persona? Who really is your target market? Are there other markets that can benefit? Are there influencers that can also benefit your market? There's a lot of research that's done initially, and that's key because at the end of the day, connecting all those dots will turn into clients, and it also establishes the framework, the type of campaign that we need to take. Because, right, if we know exactly who we need to be speaking to and how to craft a message, the campaign itself will be far more successful.
We're talking all about marketing and things like that. Yeah. And one of the questions that always kind of comes to mind is the efficacy between sort of websites, the cell phone, the content, the message, advertising, that whole ecosystem of things. How do you put it all together?
Okay. Excellent question. Number one is I want to establish a framework. Okay. And that is there's a concept, which is a critical concept, and called multi-channel marketing. There are many ways to explain that, but one of the simplest and most understandable ways of explaining that is that you also want to reach people through a variety of different senses, right? There are 5 senses. So if you're doing something with video, so video involves the eyes and the ears. Sometimes it could be some type of marketing that involves even taste or smell or feel, touch and feel. You want to approach and reach the mind through a variety of different ways. Now it's not just the 5 senses, but it's different types of ways of communicating. So if a certain business is running print ads, and then they're also doing video monologue series, and they're doing social media, so you're getting the person when they open up a newspaper or a magazine. You're getting them when they're on their phone or at the computer, or they're driving the car on the radio, for example. That is extremely helpful, and it increases. It builds top-of-mind awareness in a very strong way because the touch point happened through a variety of different channels. Now, of course, as was discussed at the very beginning of the program, it does depend on budget. Of course, you know, the bigger the budget, then the more channels you can leverage. But when a company is approaches and leverages the various different channels for multi-channel marketing, they have a much stronger presence on people's minds. And that's why it is important for a company to have a plan, to have, let's say, press releases, to have media coverage, then to have print ads, to have radio, to have social media, video, etc. Now, one more point before we move on to any other questions that you may have up your sleeve there.
Here we go. It's right here.
That is,
next one's right here.
Rule number one is reach them where they are. Okay, rule number one, reach them where they are. So if you're reaching out, so once you do the homework about your particular demographic that's interested in your product, are they on social media? Are they people living on their phones? Are they in the computer? Are they in the car? Etc. You want to reach them where they are. So therefore, if it does not make sense to run the same way that you run print ads in different newspapers, right? If, let's say, your target market reads Fortune Magazine, so then it makes sense to go on Fortune Magazine over Time Magazine because your readers are reading Fortune Magazine. So that's the platform you need to be in. So whichever platform is the platforms are being consumed for media by your target audience, those are the ones that you should be putting your resources in.
We've seen radio change so much in the last few years, some very iconic stations.
By the way, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mazel Tov to 77 WABC. We're now owned by John Katzimatidis, the Red Apple Group. Right. Yeah, by the way, I worked with John Katzimatidis when he was running for mayor back in 2009. Wow. Yeah, in the end, he stepped aside for Mike Bloomberg, the whole story there. But, John is, a very bright guy. That's a complimentary expression for someone that has great vision and just has his eye on a lot and is able to see, the corners of the room in terms of and the whole picture, the bright picture. And he's now the owner of 77 WABC.
So we've seen over the last couple of years a real change in the radio industry. Some very iconic stations, KFOG out in California, WPLJ 95.5 in New York, turned off its signal. Other stations all over the place have either changed the formats or been sold. Mm-hmm. How effective is radio today, and where does radio still fit within the marketing universe?
Excellent question. Radio, and I know that some people might say, well, it's going to be a predictable answer, but let me just back it up. Radio is extremely powerful, and here's why. Okay, so let me just go with that. First of all, I do want to explain that anything that's created on radio, of course, in today's environment, is re-leveraged onto all the podcasting channels. So therefore, when someone says, well, what's the point of going on radio? You can always go on podcast. Yeah, well, guess what? If you're on real radio, you have the credibility. That's really the key word. The authenticity, the credibility of being, especially on 77 WABC, and then it gets repurposed and rebroadcast. Of course, it goes on iTunes and Google Play and Spotify and all those channels, of course. Okay, but the real differentiator for radio, and of course this applies to podcasting as well, is you have a chance to explain the narrative. You have a chance to tell your story. Corporate storytelling is the rage, and we're going to talk, of course, with James Rosebush about it next week's show. But when someone runs a print ads are great, and articles in the newspaper are great. But when someone has a chance, like we're talking now, you could pick up on the cues, the verbal cues, the way things are explained. Did I raise my voice? Did I talk lower? All that is communicated through the spoken word, through the verbal narrative. That is the key differentiating factor that of course radio has over other forms of media.
Whether it's radio, whether it's marketing, how do you combat the problem of attention span that has diminished over the years? I notice from all the analytics that people don't have the focus to just sit, and just sit and not really be occupied. Now it's now it's like if you're on the bus or the subway, you got to whip out your cell phone or the paper, or you have to do something. And even then, you're only looking at a web page for 30 seconds, or you're flipping from this to that. And people are
So,
moving
Richard,
stations to station.
Richard.
How did you battle that?
Well, station to station was always a thing in the car. You hit your preset button, went to that, boom, you went to the next one. But the fact of the matter is, yes, attention spans are much shorter than they used to be. But that's life. That's life. So you just have to be engaging. You got to hold on to them as best you can, because the fact that what you just described is the fact. Attention spans have gone down, for better, for worse. That's just the way it is.
How do you incorporate that reality into what you do?
Okay, so the simple answer is to try to be more creative, because anytime a person is more creative in their approach, the attention span will you'll hold on to the person, because they want to watch. People want to be stimulated. That's you got you're playing with the brain approach. You basically want to keep the individual engaged. The more that they'll be engaged, the less drop-off factor.
You mean like turning the tables like that? Okay, that's different.
We're having this enjoyable show, this give and take with my buddy. I don't want to say partner in crime. I want to get people scared out there. But my comrade, radio comrade, Richard Solomon, the noted attorney and consultant. Thank you again for joining me here.
It is always a pleasure, not only to be here, but to really listen to you on Sunday nights.
Thank you.
I work a lot of Sunday nights, and one of the things that's great is you put the radio on in the background, put on the 77, and not only that, but if there was a way to take your library of all those books of all these people and somehow take it and just shoot it into your head, the wealth of information would be unbelievable.
It's true. I mean, thank you. We're approaching 5 complete years since we started the show. We started in July of 2015. So we're in February now, or March. A couple of months away from completing. That's roughly 250 shows. And there were some that had multiple guests. So I've interviewed over 350 people. It's exciting.
And they're very different. They have different approaches. They have different philosophies. A lot of battlefield experience. Yeah. Real hard knocks. Wisdom galore. And I think that's just great, because you can go to all the school you want. Yeah. But I think I think of almost all your guests as kind of educators. Yeah. Because what they're doing is they're bringing so much wisdom and experience that and the stories that they tell, from the heart of struggle, of triumph over adversity, and success.
I like to call it a virtual university, to some degree. The Wall Street Journal had a column. This goes back, I think, around 2.5 years ago. A front page story that basically said, universities fail to teach students how to think. And I was in the Wall Street Journal, so I don't want to get in trouble for this. This was the Wall Street Journal that wrote that story. So this show is about brass tacks, real world experience, real world knowledge, and what do you maybe give a shout out to my guest next week. I'm going to have James Rosebush on the show, I'm going to ask him that question that we talked about.
I have a feeling that is going to be a very high impact show.
Thank you.
Just knowing,
I had him on a couple times.
Just knowing his resume, his experience, and his effectiveness. I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, Richard, I let you hijack the first whatever, the first couple of portions.
It's these criminal terms.
There's only around 10, 15 minutes left to the show. I'm going to turn it back around. We're going to do the Vinhapachu back on you, okay? Because you have a lot to share with the world. I of course, appreciate, you gave me the opportunity, put me on the spot there, and gave me the opportunity to talk about Bottom Line Marketing Group and, of course, the great team that we have here and how we service. And I'm going to say it straight out. If, we're looking to help companies scale. If you're ready to scale, give me a shout, 718-412-3505, 718-412-3505. We're looking to help you scale your company. But now I'm going to continue to do my job of making sure that I get my guests to share their experience, their talent, their knowledge, and therefore I'm going to turn to you. Richard, you're in you're a noted attorney, and you're in court quite a bit in representing your clients. As I've said here on the show in the past, make sure he's on your side. In fact, what's the website? How can people find out how to get in touch with you?
Well, the best way is to get on the internet, the Solomon Channel.
Yeah, I love it.
The Solomon Channel.
Because he has a show on FM. He wrote a book, How to Fight in Court and Win, Small Claims Court and Win. He has a lot of stuff. He's a public speaker. So again, thesolomonchannel.com.
That's pretty much
straight up.
That's the central focus.
Straight up.
And then from there, you can see all the cool things that are part of what we do.
So perhaps you could share. My understanding is there's been quite a few changes in terms of the small claims court, in terms of fines, in terms of approach. Perhaps you could share and let our listeners, get in on this.
This is actually news to me. One of my clients said that they were going to bring a case in small claims court because the new limit was $10,000, and I said, no, the limit's $5,000. And then they said, no, it's 10. And I looked it up at the nycourts.gov website, and sure enough, New York City raised the limit on small claims courts to $10,000. And I'm like, wow, because when you think about it, legal fees are very, very prohibitive.
Right.
Especially the smaller the case. You have like a $2,000 case. You're going to really hire a lawyer to prosecute.
And you're going to burn out the money before you make anything back.
The time and just the schlepping to the lawyer's office and explaining the case. But now it seems that they've raised the limit to $10,000. And that gives a lot of businesses with collection issues the impetuous to go in there, and maybe it's like, you know what, these people owe me 9, they owe me 10. Even if they owe you 11, you'd sue for 10 because So it's sort of worthwhile because you still don't have to pay for an attorney because the small claims court rules haven't changed. It's just that they adjusted the limit. And the truth is, there's a lot of debt out there that people want to collect. There's disputes, property damage, accidents. There's all kinds of stuff out there. Mm-hmm. And to some extent, $5,000 may have been okay for other times. But currently, people are fairly sophisticated, and they do have issues, and they shouldn't be constrained by a money limit. So that what's great about small claims court is you can go to court. You don't need a lawyer. There's really not a lot of things that you need to know about evidence and procedure. It's fairly simplified. It's very important that business owners take advantage of it. You don't really need a lawyer. You just make sure you have good backup, good documentation, good invoices. You paper your trail. You do all the common sense things, and you tell your story. And the fee for going to court is very small. It's a small transaction fee. You pay it to the clerk. They take care of the serving of the papers and what the court calendars are. And essentially, you show up. You tell your story, and if you're defending, you present your defense. Everybody's got their papers. Most days now, everybody's got email and text, so you just kind of print all that stuff out, and you bring it with you, or a photo, or estimates, and things like that. And everybody kind of tells their story. A impartial person, whether it's the judge or people who are volunteers for the court, look that evidence over, and they make a decision, and then that's it, and you're good to go. But if you think about it, let's say you have a lot of receivables and they're piling up. Maybe you do send somebody to small claims court once in a while just to clean them up.
Right.
Another trend that I see, talk about trends, because there's always trends are very important in business to see where things are going. A lot more regulation than there's ever been. There's more license requirements now than ever been. There's more educational requirements than there have ever been. There's more regulatory inspections than there have been. In construction, they've changed the number of hours you need for certain kinds of safety classes that have been upped. Things involving real estate licenses, they've changed that, and you need more education. In the employment, there's certain educational or training that you have to do that didn't exist years ago. So one of the things that I tell people who are business owners is find out what the new obligations are. Talk to your compliance people, talk to your insurance people, talk to your accountants, talk to the attorneys, talk to your marketing people. There's also, you need to make sure you have disclaimers out there. Make sure your disclaimers are concurrent with all the new rules and regulations out there. Maybe, all the content that you've had up on the web for 10 years needs to be freshened up as far as maybe copyright notices, maybe your compliance issues. I know that there's certain things that have come up in terms of accessibility, in terms of the way you transact business, the way you communicate warnings, how you represent things. It's time. It's a new decade. Time for fresh new content that reflects all. And because the economy is pretty good right now overall, it's a good time to invest in yourself, in your business.
In a show that we did at the beginning of 2020, you talked about it was a really good show. I actually encourage the listeners to go back and listen to it, mybradio.com, mybradio.com. You talked about some best practices. And as any good professional knows, you can never review these things often enough, right? Because when, God forbid, something happens like, oh, why didn't I do that? What are some best practices that kind of any small businesses should have down in terms of record keeping and making sure that they back up things? Some best practices that are just good common sense tips for any small business out there.
Hire the best people is the first tip. Hire the most competent professionals that you can find, whether it's marketing, accounting, legal, compliance. Call the people that you buy services from, insurance brokers and vendors. Am I getting the best prices? You may have paid the same phone bill for 30 years. Have you ever called up your carrier and say, are there any promotions or specials that I could take advantage of? Can I upgrade? Can I get a free upgrade? Could I get maybe a little faster internet for no extra money because I'm a legacy customer, been around for so long? What's my reward for being a loyal, good customer? You want to make sure that you're on top of the trends in your business. Do you go to enough trade shows and read enough trade papers to be current?
To stay up to date.
Right. Because it's not so much that you need to sort of know what's going on from, quote, the mainstream media, because that's too general.
Right.
If you're in a trade, if you're in medicine, or if you're in teaching, if you're in law, you really need to still find out what the trends are. What's going on? What's going on in real estate? What are the laws that they're proposing? What is the impact? If you think about it, look what the apps did for the equivalent of car sharing. Long time ago there were taxis. Right. Then they came up with the green taxis.
That's right.
Right. That changed the dynamics.
Right.
So it was the yellow cabs, and there were the green cabs.
Right. Boroughs.
Then there were these other things. These other private companies. I don't want to mention anybody's name because but that shattered the whole business. These ride sharing companies, that changed everything. And then the question is, what's going to change next? Will driverless cars change that?
Turn over the market.
Right. One question I always want to ask, sort of, I go to court a lot for, vehicle-related things, especially trucks. And I noticed that a lot of smaller towns really make a lot of revenue. Revenue is kind of a funny word, but they receive a lot of proceeds on the basis of fines and penalties and things like that. And it's like, well, what are you going to do when the driverless cars don't speed?
Right.
That's right. And they don't make an improper turn,
that's real
and they don't have
that's going to be missing.
And other and look at trends like libraries. Our libraries, physical libraries with walls and walls of books, 40 years from now, is that going to be relevant? If you're, let's say you're an educational institution, do you necessarily want to invest in a book-based library if books are not going to be the future?
All on the iPad. Richard, we are almost out of time, around 60 seconds left. Perhaps you could share a takeaway with the listeners of Mind Your Business.
The most important thing that is to communicate. Communicate with your people, with your clients, with your vendors. Don't take it for granted that your clients and your customers are always going to know what's going on, going to tell you what's going on, and always be there. Show interest, be interested, communicate with them.
I love the honor of interviewing C-level executives and sharing their great advice and perspective on Mind Your Business. I'd love to get your feedback. Post it in the comments below and subscribe. You'll never miss an edition of Mind Your Business.